Father God, right now we just thank you for raising up men like Tom DeWeese that helps us understand what the government's trying to take from us. During this meeting, we just ask you to bless him, bless the words out of his mouth. Father, I just pray that you give us ears to hear and courage to act on what we hear. And Father God, today we just ask that you raise up some mighty warriors in this room tonight, people that are ready to fight for our rights, stand up for what's right, face evil head on, and just keep marching forward. God, right now we just thank you for your son, Jesus Christ, who makes it possible for us to gather like this. Thank you for his salvation. Thank you for the power that he gives us through the Holy Spirit. We ask you again to bless this meeting. In Jesus' name, amen.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. All right, I get the great pleasure, the ultimate pleasure of introducing Tom this evening, and I did get to spend the day with him, and that was delightful. You don't always get to spend that much time with someone who knows that much, and you kind of feel kind of silly asking the right questions, but it was really informational, and I so enjoyed. So I just asked him my own basic questions, and I tell you what, this is one likable gentleman who will answer any question. Hopefully a lot of your questions will be answered this evening, and at the very end we'll open it up for very short questions because he's been on the road for 5 days already, and so we need to get him back to the hotel and get him ready to go for tomorrow. So but we will have a few time at the end for a few short questions and a little bit of time for that. But I just want to point out a couple of things before he comes on up here. This is all about the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs of the United Nations, as we know, which our federal government is in cahoots with and has been for a while, depending on the administration that is in charge of the federal government. All things, words that I detest as a United States government and Constitution instructor. So this is kind of what this is about tonight. Just a couple of things I've noted. The breadbasket of Eastern Hemisphere, Ukraine is under siege right now. I don't know if you've heard about all that. Not really sure what's going on over there, but Ukraine is in a world of hurt. The breadbasket of the Western Hemisphere, the Midwest, is also under siege right now. And I don't even know if we all know about that. That one's pretty obvious. And I know we have some pretty educated people in this room. So some of you know, but some of us, we don't know to what degree. And it's much more subtle over here, but it's just as diabolical. 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution. The powers not delegated, the 17 powers that were delegated to the United States federal government, well, there were ones that weren't delegated. The federal government only has power in 17 specific areas. The powers not delegated to the United States, the federal government, by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Keep that in mind. That's the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Tom is going to talk about that this evening. All right, his official bio, then I'm going to add just a couple things and I'll be done. Tom DeWeese is one of the nation's leading advocates of individual liberty, free enterprise, private property rights, and American sovereignty and independence. Tom was one of the first to voice concern over the radical agenda of the environmental movement and to question its motives. Tom is a native of Ohio, and he's been a candidate for the Ohio legislature, so he's gone through that whole process. Served as an editor of 2 newspapers and has owned several businesses. In 1989, Tom led the only privately funded election observation team to the Panamanian elections, and in 2006, Tom was invited to Cambridge University to debate the issue of the United Nations before the Cambridge Union, a 200-year-old debating society. Today, he serves as the founder and president of the American Policy Center and the author of 3 books, Now Tell Me I Was Wrong, Erase, which I think probably may stand for something, I'm not sure. Erase, but it is a fictional political thriller, kind of based on his own experience, which he and I were discussing today, which is, I can't wait to get it and read it this summer. It's going to be a summer read for me. And Sustainable, the War on Free Enterprise, Free Property, and Individuals. Most recently, Thomas presented the Edward Teller Award for the Defense of Freedom by the Doctors for Disaster Preparedness. And just as an aside, I was taking notes in the truck today as the Muellers were driving. The first DeWeese entered the United States, before it was the United States, the North American continent in the early 1600s, 400 years ago, from the Netherlands, and this original ancestor was a financier for the Rembrandt paintings. William DeWeese Jr. owned half of Valley Forge. Ringing a bell? He came in, bought the country. I know this was back in the day, when you could afford to buy country. Where George Washington trained his soldiers. George Washington mentioned in his memoirs or journal that the United States soldiers were eating him out of house and home. DeWeese's house is still there, so they didn't quite make it all the way. Their house is still there. William DeWeese Sr. was the High Sheriff of Philadelphia in 1776. You can look these things up. They are history. John Adams assigned the senior DeWeese the task of reading publicly for the first time the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia. One of the DeWeese ancestors, relatives, rode with Teddy Roosevelt up the San Juan Hill way back when, over 100 years ago. And a DeWeese rode with Doc Holliday out here in the late 1800s. So we have a little Western blood as well. There are 8 different spellings of DeWeese, and there's a large settlement of that family still in Ohio between Dayton and Cincinnati. The reason I said all that was to say this. This is an American. We are Americans. Whether or not this is your first year or your 400th year for your family in this nation, we need to be united in the preservation of this nation. And that's what Tom's all about. Tom, we're so happy to have you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to see all of you. I've had a very interesting day we went to Mount Rushmore today. It's the first time. This is the first time I have ever been to South Dakota. There were before this day, there were 4 states I've never been to: South Dakota, North Dakota, Arkansas for some reason, and Alaska. Now it's only 3. And I intend to spend more time here. We saw a whole lot of territory today. You've got an absolutely beautiful state. And I hope before we're all done, I'm going to give you ideas on how to make sure it's not only beautiful, but it's safe and its arms are wide open for freedom. And that's what we're going to work towards. I have been an activist for the cause of freedom for 55 years. I was on college campuses in the early 1970s, facing down the radical left, including the SDS, Students for Democratic Society, the Young Socialist Alliance, the Black Panthers, the Weathermen. We actually were in hand-to-hand combat on a few college campuses as those peace demonstrations went on. I learned firsthand how they twisted facts and reality to spread their propaganda, and I saw how they prepared for demonstrations to be turned into riots. All they had to do was place some rocks and some bottles all along the march route that was planned, and then they have 5 or 10 of their own trained people, their members mix in with the 5,000 students who honestly thought they were marching for peace. Of course, the police would be there on the sidelines, prepared if there's any trouble. And at the right moment, one of the SDS members would simply throw a rock or a bottle at the police, and the games began. And the news media declared it a police riot. We're seeing some of these same tactics being used in some of our communities. Well, what we used to do was walk along the planned route when we knew it, and some scheduled police or peace march. And then we would find the stacks in the bottle of the rocks in the bottles, and if we could, we'd take them away. So we knew their game and understood their tactics. It was pretty clear. The whole tactic was revolution of America in our system. That was the target, to completely change it all. Those same people, a lot of them, when the Vietnam War ended, the anti-war protests stopped, a lot of people thought, well, those kids, they're going to grow up and get mature, and they're going to go out and find jobs and so forth. Yeah, they did. These were dedicated Marxists that were trained to destroy America. And the first thing they did after they went through college, a lot of them became college professors. A lot of them went into the news media. A lot of them went into corporate America, running our corporations. This is why you see so much of this stuff happening. These guys were trained then, and they're dedicated activists today. We're still dealing with a lot of them. Now, you know, throughout history, when we had people, there's always been somebody who wanted to rule the world. You know, you had ancient kings and potentates in the back times, but we also had the Hitlers and the Stalins and the Lenins and these people. Now, always in the past, when they decided they were going to rule the world, what they did was they organized armies, and they invaded, and they broke things, and they killed people, and they subjugated people. Today, you and I are facing a diabolical force unlike anything that we've had to face in history. Those behind what's happening, are driving towards a goal of global control. And they have figured out a way to get you to voluntarily surrender your liberties and actually help them control you. Now, what could be such a powerful voice that can get the population to help destroy our own culture and our liberty and leading to our own personal destruction? Fear. That is the weapon. But fear of what? This is where it's diabolical. The fear of environmental Armageddon. I have had environmentalists get in my face and say, it doesn't matter how many rights you think you have if you don't have a planet to stand on. Ooh, yeah. And why that's really so diabolical is because the environment doesn't recognize nor respect political boundaries. The boundaries of sovereign nations, the boundaries of states, the boundaries of counties, of cities, of your yard. Rivers run through without any decision on who owns it. And so that gives them a powerful weapon that they've got to come in and protect the environment. If we don't have that planet, what are we going to do? And you're just selfish if you don't go along with that. But that's why it's so diabolical. This tactic has given the globalist left the ability to shoot down any opposition. Now, there's a lot of details that I can share with you, the background, the policies, the players, and all of this. What I want to first focus on is an issue that is facing you directly. Now, I know it's not exactly in this part of the state, but it is in your state, and it's going to affect how your state is run, your property rights, money, taxes, so forth. I want to talk to you specifically this evening about the proposed carbon capture pipeline that is set to run over certain parts of South Dakota and 4 other neighboring states. The main reason for it, we're told, is to protect the environment and take action for climate change. Now, I'm here to tell you that I've studied these environmental policies for over 30 years. I've seen a lot of dumb policies. We fought them, what they do, and so forth. I know the origins and the purposes of these policies, and I know the players behind them, and I know the truth. I also know that in response to my appearance here in the state this week, somewhere, somehow, you're going to hear that I am a discredited conspiracy theorist and a hate monger. Yes, I am. I'm not a theorist anymore. I'm now factually telling you what the conspiracy has been. By the way, the Southern Poverty Law Center has done 4 separate reports on me. They said that they have done, that I have created a career. Thank you. They said that I created a career out of spreading lies and hate, and that Agenda 21 is just a voluntary idea, just a good suggestion on protecting the environment. Yeah, right. Well, now usually at this point, I would take up considerable time to educate you on the whole Agenda 21 issue, how it got started. Now, I don't have time to do all of that tonight. I'll do some. But let me give you a real fast overview using the words of those who created it. See, this is the interesting thing. They call me this conspiracy theorist spreading lies. All I have ever done is quote them. If I sound crazy, it's because it's their words. Let me give you some examples here. Agenda 21 was introduced at the 1992 United Nations Earth Summit, and there were, it was in Rio de Janeiro, and there were 50,000 delegates there. Some of them were UN delegates, representatives of countries and so forth, but most of them were what we call non-governmental organizations, NGOs. These were the people who helped write Agenda 21 in the first place. Now, they were not in Rio de Janeiro to have a picnic on the beach. They had a serious goals, an agenda, what they wanted to do. They describe Agenda 21 as a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. Can it be any clearer? The chairman of the Earth Summit was Maurice Strong. He told the delegates, quote, current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, use of fossil fuels, appliances, air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. Now that was over 31 years ago that he said that, and today every single one of those valuable parts of our society is under attack by government policy. Strong summed up his address saying, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized nations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? Later, Christiana Figueres, the executive secretary of the UN's Framework Convention on Climate Change, said, quote, this is the first time in the history of mankind that we're setting ourselves the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution. Free enterprise is what they're talking about. Did you hear anything in that statement, or either one of those, about protecting the environment? They use the term sustainable development constantly, everywhere you turn. Sustainable, sustainable, sustainable. This product's sustainable. You've got to be sustainable in how you live. Sustainable. They tell us that it's just a good idea for protecting our resources. In reality, sustainable is a trigger word to get you to voluntarily surrender your liberties. As soon as you hear sustainable, eyes glaze over and you start to march in the right direction. Yes, sir, sustainable. I got to save the planet. Now, here is a definition of sustainable. This was written by a lady who was a friend of mine. She was a powerful voice in the fight against Agenda 21 and sustainable development. She actually was the head of Democrats against sustainable development, or against Agenda 21. Her name was Rosa Corey, and she was a liberal. But she figured this one out. She understood. And she put together the best definition I've found on sustainable development. She said this: sustainable development is the action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all information, all energy, and all human beings in the world. Inventory and control. and they enforce it with fear, climate change. That is what you are now facing with the drive to create the carbon capture pipeline, and South Dakota is on the front lines. Let's take a look at the true facts. First of all, there is no evidence whatsoever to back up the claims of man-made climate change. We have no islands that have disappeared under the water. We have had no cities engulfed. There has been warming since, the earth used to be covered in ice. But, so we've had warming going on. But today, the polar ice caps are not melting. Polar bears are not drowning. They are, in fact, gaining in their populations. It is the reason that you don't hear from, so they tell us there's a consensus of scientists. Well, first of all, you don't have consensus in science. You have facts. You have people who agree with them, people who don't. There are thousands of scientists, and I'm privileged to work with many of them, that have, some of them actually believed in climate change to begin with, but then they began to do their research and they found there was no fact to it. What happens to those scientists? First of all, they are unfunded from grants and so forth for their study. Second of all, they are blocked from getting their articles, their reports published in science magazines. That's why you don't hear any kind of a other side. Anybody then who comes out against this, of course, is a climate denier. I know who the climate deniers are, the people who have absolutely no understanding of it whatsoever to call themselves environmentalists. Now, I want to say something very radical. Golly, me? Nearly every program promoted as environmental protection is an actual threat to the environment. The National Forest Service refuses to remove dead trees from the floors of forests, creating 8 feet of kindling, causing the worst forest fires in history. Now today, as we drove all over the area here in this area, several million, you think, trees we saw lying dead on the ground, nobody's cleaning them up? That's kindling. When a forest fire breaks out, that burns. Now, they will tell you, the environmentalists, that, well, before man came along, natural, that's the way it was anyway. So we're just letting it be natural, because there weren't anybody to clean up the dead trees before we came along. They believe that man is not part of the ecology. We are a threat to it, and so we don't do that. Mining for lithium, for battery-powered electric cars destroys monstrous areas of land never to recover. And the only true source for it is now controlled by China. Literally, you can see it. It looks like the Grand Canyon, the places where they're digging for this. And if you take a look at when they intend to have all our cars coming from there, and all the lithium batteries providing our energy for all that, just imagine the absolute total destruction of the environment. Wind and solar processes produce next to nothing for the power grid. If all the fossil fuels were banned and all the power was to come from wind and solar, first of all, talk about protecting the environment, you will have millions and millions and millions and millions of acres underneath plastic panels. 2 things are happening under all that. First of all, underneath all of that, to protect the infrastructure, to get the wires to, because you're making electricity here, is cement. It's all paved under there, or stones in some cases, but basically it's all paved. Nothing grows. Second of all, if you ever see a picture of what it looks like on acre after acre after acre of that, you don't see any trees. They are cutting down trees by the millions. In Scotland, they cleared several thousand acres for this, and they cut down something like 14 million trees to do it. Now, I just learned the other day that, you've probably heard that the big wind turbines, that the blades are not biodegradable, and they have to bury them in the ground. Well, that's caused a big stir as they're trying to do all this. And someone came up with the idea that they could start making the blades out of balsa wood. There is now an attack on balsa trees by the millions to do this. Oh, all of this to protect the environment. Second of all, when you have 70, these wind towers are higher than 70 level skyscrapers. 70 floor level skyscrapers. I can't talk now. And these monster things. If all of this is in place, nothing is going to be growing on millions and millions of acres. Nothing is going to be flying in the air. And this is all to protect the environment. And what do we get out of all of this? If they achieve all of that they intend to do, we will end up with about 4% of the energy that we need to run our economy, to run our society. And yet, every single thing they're moving on now is make it electric, make it electric, make it electric. We already know in California, they're already telling the people with the electric cars, don't you dare charge those on a hot day. This is the insanity that we're dealing with here, and none of it is, not only does it not protect the environment, it's destroying the environment. And you think, millions of acres to do all this, but regular power plants take up what, 2 or 3 acres and cover huge cities and so forth to provide what they need? But we are the ones destroying the environment. And I was told that, and it's not only about whether the sun's shining or the wind's blowing, where they have electricity, but also when it snows, covers over the panels. So they came up with this idea that they're going to put these on every single solar panel. They're going to put this little electric heater on there and run it down into where it's creating electricity. And what I read was that little heater would take up pretty much all the electricity that panel would create in the first place. So, you just have to wonder how much raw material, including limestone, steel, aluminum, cobalt, and nickel, will be, they have to take to produce a single wind turbine. And what about the transmission lines needed to get the electricity onto the power grid? These, on and on with this. They won't tell us how many species, how many birds and so forth are killed by the windmills. The Interior Department they know how many birds are killed, but such information they will tell you is classified. Gee, I wonder why. 2,400 such turbines wouldn't produce enough electricity for the peak summer needs of New York State. They intended to convert the entire nation to this. Remember when we used to call environmentalists tree huggers? Where are they now? Are they not going to chain themselves up to the balsa trees and something? No. This shows you the hypocrisy of it. They know. They definitely have dedicated people who really believe in all of this, that they're trying to save the planet. But the leadership knows. Their hypocrisy knows no bounds. They are absolutely lying, and it is all about political power. Biden's energy czar, John Kerry. There's a dude. He has accused small farms of being significant emitters of nitrogen. He is now pushing for the federal government to crack down on farming in America to combat global warming. Now, if that sounds crazy, the European Union has already called for the closing of over 2,000 farms in the Netherlands. And they're moving on this stuff. Again, where are the environmentalists? Back in my home state where I'm living, in Virginia, there is an environmental organization, a land trust, called the Piedmont Environmental Council. And they have a slogan. It's on bumper stickers all over the state, and farmers really embrace it and so forth. The bumper sticker says, "Farmland lost Is farmland lost forever? Yep. Apparently they're only worried about farmland lost to developers, not their own idiotic, unworkable green schemes. The hypocrisy is massive. I intend to usurp that slogan from them and use it to attack them for supporting solar and wind farms. Farmland lost is farmland lost forever. I'm going to turn it on them. You've heard the term net zero. It means no carbon emissions. Much of Europe marched toward this over the last 30 years. Today, they are facing a massive energy crisis and are giving up on the wind and the solar power. Now, reopening coal mines and returning to oil include India and China. China is constantly trying to pressure the United States into being responsible environmentalists and support all of these things, while they are building everything they can to have their own independent energy. And you know why? China is not our friend. They are not trying to embrace us and help us forward in this. They're trying to destroy us. That's their goal. What better way than to get us to embrace all of these issues on our power? Now, today, the same forces behind wind and solar schemes are behind the carbon capture pipeline. Your valuable farmland is the most important land in this nation, the food-producing states, and it's about to be confiscated and destroyed as food producers. All for the insane lie of climate environmental protection. In all of my years of fighting the lies and insane policies of the radical left, the carbon capture pipeline is without doubt the dumbest plan ever, but it is also the most dangerous that we have ever faced. Here's the scheme. Thousands and thousands of acres of privately owned food-producing Midwest Corn Belt farmland are targeted for several interconnecting pipelines, but not pipelines to bring us desperately needed fuel oil, of course. The letter being sent to targeted property owners from Navigator and the Heartland Greenway LLC that they're putting together. The letter says this: Navigator is proposing to build a large-scale carbon capture pipeline system spanning 1,300 miles across 5 states in the Midwest. The letter goes on to explain that the pipeline will materially reduce the participants' carbon footprint and further the goal of carbon neutrality. By the way, I wanted to mention to you, if you have no carbon footprint, you are dead. The letter goes on to say, the pipeline system will capture carbon dioxide, CO2 emissions from local facilities before these emissions reach the atmosphere and transport the CO2 safely via pipeline to a permanent and secure underground sequestration site in Illinois. They're also looking at one in Oklahoma and Minnesota. This idiotic scheme ignores biological science. Trees and plants need CO2 to live. I wish I had this up on the screen. This is a chart put out by the U.S. Navy, and I had it confirmed by a climate denier scientist, one of the leading ones, Dr. Willie Soon. And this shows that plants need CO2 to survive. That the average CO2 that we would need just to have everything like it should be would be about 1,600 parts per million of CO2. It would be really good if we could get up to about 4,000 parts per million. And but today the chart says from the U.S. Navy, we're at 400 parts per million down here. We are on the verge of CO2 starvation. We are on the verge of absolute destruction of being able to raise our food and so forth. The situation is that, if you want to eliminate carbon in the air, CO2, plant more trees. That's their food and the crops that we have. The problem is you cannot eliminate nature in the name of protecting nature. Most importantly, as I said earlier, there is no scientific evidence that there is any global warming, especially that caused by man. It's the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the human race. This is just as stupid as Bill Gates' plan to put up some kind of sky-level shield to block out the sun. And he's proposed that with a straight face. Just imagine the entire face of the earth covered with solar panels and wind towers, and between that to block out the sun, which everything on earth needs to live, block that out with something they're going to spray up in there to block it out for the environment. Exactly. Who's going to operate their solar panels? Exactly. Now, just as I've been warning for over 30 years, all of this is part of the plot as called for in Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, the Green New Deal, and now the Great Reset. And as they said in their own words, the blueprint for the reorganization of human society. Yep, I think they're right. Now, America's farmers are on the front lines of the ground war to enforce this reorganization, and this is just the beginning to get it all started. The pipeline won't be placed on the edges of the farm property. This is what's interesting. You know, we've had as governments over the years, when we had sewage lines, plumbing, electrical, telephone lines. You probably know this. Basically, on property that faces the road and so forth, it may be actually your property, but they reserve that as a place for a line to do this kind of stuff. And this, no, not going to do that. This is going to go anywhere they want it to go, willy-nilly across private property. And, right, there's some parts are right next to your house. Other parts are right through your fields and everything. And then the first thing they do is rip up all the topsoil so nothing grows on it. This is an absolute theft of property for the most idiotic plan of all time. As their land is confiscated, farmers won't be able to grow food on it. No crops will be grown. The first step in creating the pipeline will be to rip up the topsoil. As I said, again, this land is the heart of our food industry. If you think shelves in our groceries are bare now, wait until all this farmland is confiscated. The plan then is to grow all food inside in factories, providing only synthetic substitutes like the fake meat that's being marketed now. And who, of course, is pushing all that? Oh yeah, Bill Gates. But I had an epiphany. I figured this out. What were they planning to feed us with? Well, in reality, under all those billions of acres of solar panels with all the cement, I bet there's a lot of bugs going to grow up under there. That's why they call them solar farms. That's how we're going to get our food. We're just going to gather all that up and have a crunchy one. Yeah. And I often wondered, and I heard, 99% of the people that I've ever talked to say, there's no way I'm going to do that. I'm not eating any bugs. And I thought, what's the plan to get us to eat bugs? Oh, yeah, take away all the other alternatives. That's how. Oh, we've got a solution for you. Yeah. A lot of bugs have moms. I think it's just really, really sad that they want to just destroy whole families like that. And it's, Well, this is all the true purpose of the massive land buys of Bill Gates. And he is busy buying up millions of acres of farmland. He's also one of the biggest promoters of synthetic beef. And there is much more to add to the pocketbook of Bill Gates and the others like him. I got this report just a couple of weeks ago. Gates is, we say, the largest private farmland owner in the nation, with 269,000 acres of dozens and dozens of states. But that includes 2,100 acres of a potato farmland in North Dakota. Well, it's interesting to note that most of the carbon capture pipelines go to North Dakota, and much of it goes under Bill Gates' property. Now they tell us, this came out just recently, a new report from them, the people building all this, that the pipeline, now they've told us that the pipeline is simply to capture CO2 and bury it underground just to protect the climate. So they, that won't render, that could render the land worthless as he's buying, but not so fast. There is actually a plan developing to use the buried CO2 for other purposes. Navigator Heartland Greenway has announced a deal to provide CO2 to create electrofuels. In Iowa, Summit is partnering to build the world's largest plant producing ethanol-based aviation fuel, and it will be basically a $1 billion facility. So Bill Gates is now set to use this land not only to grow his fake meat, but will also profit in a huge way from the CO2 that's running under his property. Gee, I thought they told us that this was only about protecting the environment, and those corporations plan to use eminent domain to take this land and lock it away for the pipeline. So there are thousands of acres of valuable land no longer available to grow crops. Will any other farmers who have lost use of their land be able to benefit like Gates? Want to bet? Maybe BlackRock. Yep. Any of those guys who play the game. This entire scheme will help destroy the farming industry in the affected states as a few globalists reap the benefits. Worse, according to Dr. Lee Merritt, an expert on humans and plant needs for CO2, as I said earlier, she's confirmed about this shortage of CO2 and what it'll do to us. So, how? She also said that we may be at the beginning of a new Dust Bowl. You remember what the Dust Bowl did to us in the 30s? Because they're tearing up all the land, they're tearing everything down like that. That's a possibility. It's building that possibility of doing that. How does any of that help the environment? Of course, it doesn't. It's all a massive lie designed for one purpose, controlled by a mob set for global domination. That's it. No science supports it. No freedom endures it. All of us are facing a deliberately engineered life or death crisis. No food, no energy, and a massive damage to the environment, all in the name of protecting it. On top of that, the carbon capture pipelines have now been shown to be a major health hazard. In a small town in Mississippi, a carbon capture pipeline ruptured. A green cloud descended over the town, blocking oxygen and creating a foul smell. Dozens of people became disoriented, nauseated, and dazed. Many collapsed in their homes, even car engines shut off because they need oxygen. And there were no emergency training for the first responders on how to deal with this. Months later, some people are still reporting mental fogginess. There are three main forces pushing these carbon capture pipelines. They are private companies named Summit Carbon Solutions, Vanguard, Navigator CO2 Ventures. These are private companies. They are not public utilities. Yet their letter to property owners contains this threat. We intend to file a petition with the Iowa Utilities Board, in this case it was from Iowa, for permission to build the pipelines. It goes on to say, our goal is to reach voluntary agreements with all landowners along the project route. Though if we are unable to do so, we may need to request the right of eminent domain condemnation from the board. Now, some county officials, and again, a lot I'm going to tell you because I've worked this in Iowa and I'm just beginning now to work it here. But a lot I have to tell you is from my experience from there. Some county officials have already surrendered to this tyranny. I've heard them saying, there's just not much we can do. It looks like it's just going to happen. They are wrong. There was a headline in a paper in Iowa, local governments have no legal power to stop carbon dioxide pipelines. That is an absolute lie. If the Iowa Utilities Board oversteps their bounds and permits private companies to just take private land, that is a violation. It is theft. The fact is, no land has yet actually been taken. The angry farmers and other landowners are showing up in public meetings in large numbers, and many city council and county supervisors there, county commissioners here, are opposed to the plan, and there's time to stop it. But many don't know how. I do. The biggest roadblock to stopping the pipeline is the total failure of state legislatures to stand up and protect property rights from the assault of the pipelines. And too many governors are playing ball with the corporations. You might know one. So, until enough pressure can be brought to those legislators and governors, it is up to the county supervisors to lead the way and protect their citizens. But now, I want to talk directly. I'm going to say this because I know this will be reproduced. I want to talk directly to your city councilmen and your county supervisors. You are the body directly elected by the people to protect their rights. You must take direct action. Appointed boards represent no one. Elected officials create these appointed boards basically to be the bureaucracy or the workers to do the work. When they pass some kind of a policy, they created an appointed board to make it happen. They don't represent anybody. They're not elected to that. They're appointed to it to do a job. But what these cowardly elected officials do when they don't want to deal with you, they don't want to talk to you, they say, you'll need to talk to the board. Really? Or, well, the board says we can't, there's nothing I can do. Suddenly, these elected officials just start using them as an excuse. Well, all I can say is you are cowards. You are absolute cowards. You were elected to protect the property rights, the whole rights of those in your constituents, not to shudder there in the corner afraid of a board you created. You, as elected officials, have the power and the obligation to stand up and lead, protect your people. You have the power and the duty to take legislative action to stop this pipeline. Especially, never ever give them the power of eminent domain, absolute theft. First, I'm being told that most county supervisor boards are opposed to the pipeline. I say to you, prove it. In each county, I call on the county commissioners to form a liberty coalition for your board. Pledge to each other that you will stand together to protect local property rights from the use of eminent domain. And you can specifically say it's for the carbon capture pipeline, but I would all add in there too, the solar panel farms and the wind farms and so forth. They are intimidating property owners, trying to take their property, getting them to give it up. We need to protect that property, protect those constituents. You put this Liberty Coalition together. Fulfill that pledge by preparing a legislative plan to protect the local land that has been targeted for the pipeline. Property rights protection is the #1 weapon to use against all sustainable policy, because if private property is protected, then sustainable policy cannot be enforced. All sustainable policy robs private property to be put in place. First, and this is one of the biggest weaknesses that we have in our movement in this, what is the definition of private property? People, a lot of people just think, well, I paid the mortgage, so I guess it's mine. But beyond that, they don't think too much about more about what it is. And one of the things, before I give you a definition, one of the things that people should begin to ask their own elected officials is this: by what right do you have to dictate to me everything I can do on my property? What can I do on my property without your permission? What stake do you have in it? If I fail, if I lose my property, if it's taken from me, if it's destroyed, what stake do you have in it? Show me your pockets. You know, they've got no stake in it. They've got no right to tell you all these rules and regulations about how you're allowed to live. Well, as this fight started to grow clear back in the 1990s and so forth, as it was getting more and more court cases on private property takings due to environmental stuff, elected officials, judges, and so forth began to realize they didn't have a good definition of private property. A Chief Justice of the Washington State Supreme Court, his name is Richard B. Sanders, came to a conclusion on that, and he wrote a definition to protect private property. This is the definition that he created, and it fits perfectly because it fits exactly the threat we're facing. Property in a thing consists not merely in its ownership and possession, but in the unrestricted right of use, enjoyment, and disposal. Anything which destroys property, which destroys any of the elements of property, to that extent destroys the property itself. The substantial value of property lies in its use. If the right of use be denied, the value of the property is annihilated and ownership becomes a barren right. Now, let me explain something to you, because in that first sentence, it has a word in there that if you try to use that, the globalist heads will explode. Unrestricted. Well, let me explain something to you. Since the beginning of human settlements, there have been nuisance laws. And basically, if somebody next door to you has a loud noise or a bright light or a bad smell or something coming over to your property, you, first of all, neighbor to neighbor, you go over and say, Charlie, can you turn that light off at night? It's shining in my bedroom window, or whatever the case may be. And Charlie, if he's a good guy, says, I didn't know that. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll take care of it. Problem solved, neighbor to neighbor. But if Charlie's a complete jerk and he says, I got more bright lights, watch this, then nuisance laws. You go to court and you deal with it that way. All of these sustainable rules are a one-size-fits-all dictate. Now we have all these regional councils where counties, 10, 15, 20 counties, all put into the same regional operation. And they are dictating in all those counties exactly the same policies. One size fits all. You guys have a very different life here than several other counties over. You know that. It's a different atmosphere, different environments, on and on. So one size fits all doesn't work. That's one of the biggest problems with this. That's control. That diminishes your ability to elect officials to run your community the way you want it run, because there's these laws up here and the appointed boards, of course, that go with them. You need strong legislation to defend property against the use of eminent domain on that pipeline. Declare your county protected. That is number one of your Freedom Coalition to do. You get that property and say, property in our county is protected. As you are organizing these efforts in your county, and again, I'm still talking to your elected officials, extend your hands to all of your neighboring counties, the other county boards of county commissions and so forth, and with the city councils to work together. Get them all to set up their own Liberty Coalition. Agree on property rights protection, and then introduce that same exact legislation in every single county. Do it on the same day in every county, and then hold a news conference at the same time and day in each county all across to declare your actions, declare your counties free of the threat. If you do this, you will build an impenetrable wall around your county where private property is protected against private developers who intend to work in secret to take anything that they want. Finally, this warning to every elected representative who wants to carry out this plan. And you know this is happening in the halls of the state legislature and probably in counties and city halls. If someone comes up to you to apply pressure or a bribe to make you stop this effort, head immediately to the nearest reporter and microphone and expose them. Tell them right then and there what this guy's doing. They're trying to buy me. They're trying to force me. You do that a couple of times, and I guarantee they're going to run for the hills because the spotlight is their enemy. Stand up. Join hands with other counties just as committed and say, no, do not back down, do this, and the pipeline will never be built. Now, in fact, several counties have now taken action such as this to protect the property rights in there against the pipeline. In Emmons County, North Dakota, supervisors there passed legislation requiring 100% voluntary easements to be signed or the pipeline cannot move forward in that county. Now, one of the things you watch going on there is these guys are lying about how many voluntary easements that they've had signed. I've seen lots of incredible numbers of that. They're nowhere close to that. Here in South Dakota, Brown and Spink County, they have both passed moratoriums blocking any permits of construction on the pipeline. In Iowa, Woodbury County, a judge has ruled that the pipeline companies cannot come on private property without the owner's permission. Now, you know already what's happened right here in South Dakota with these guys came on there to look over the county, and the owner said no. And they accused him of threatening to kill them. And now they're showing up armed. These guys aren't even government, these surveyors aren't even government agents. They are with the private corporations. Get off my property. Who the heck do you think you are? It's mine. And I have a right to defend my property. When I first got involved in this issue, I had a Zoom meeting with several people who were working in Iowa to fight. And one of the guys on it was a farmer. And he said that they'd already come on his property and staked it out, put wood stakes all over it. I said, tear him out, it's your property. And he did. He's not in jail yet. We've got to stop being afraid of these guys. They're tyrants, they're bullies. What do we do to bullies? We show them they're not going to bully us. Now, to you private citizens, to you farmers. Oh, well, that's all right. Oh, I got some. Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. Don't worry. I might need two. That's all right. Okay. Abundance of a resource. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. So now, to each of you, farmers, private citizens, do not expect your elected representatives to do this alone. Even if they're willing to do it, even if they want to do it, the worst thing you can possibly do is you go out there on the stage. You go out and do it. Bye. You know? He needs backup. He needs support. He needs you to be there. And they also need to know that you are watching them. And are they standing strong? Keeping pressure on them as well. We've got to keep that up. Above all, if you have a farm or property that is in the pathway of this thing, number one, you must never, ever sign an easement on this. Do not sign an easement for them to be able to take your land. It will not save your farm. It will doom it. I have received word that the corporations intend to file suit against counties that pass such legislation, as I mentioned. Suing for what? Suing for their right to protect you for what they were elected to do? because they're stopping these corporations from stealing private land. Next, I've been told that Vanguard has claimed that if we succeed in stopping the pipeline, they intend to sell the property on which they hold the easements. That is outright theft. If a project is done and gone, so are the easements, so are the signed easements. Null and void. This is the mentality of the thugs we're dealing with here. They do not care one whit about you or your rights. It doesn't matter how many rights you have if you don't have a planet to stand on. Oh yeah. Legislation must be put in place that specifically declares that if a project like this ceases, then that, it's to be eliminated. I'm telling you now. I'm going to tell you what we have to do to win. Make sure that they stand strong. This is not a time for compromise or weak efforts. Local government is now infested with planners, with NGOs, these non-governmental organizations, federal agencies dictating policy called smart growth, and I mentioned sustainable development. This is going on in every single city in America. There are 20,000 NGO organizations. They have almost $50 billion at their disposal, and that doesn't count the corporate billions and the government billions. This is just what's in their pockets. And they are trained to target every single city in America and put these plans in place. Every single environmental issue, whether even or policy that's coming out of your community, even if it's something kind of as innocuous as a bike trail or a bike lane in your highway. Every one of those issues has an NGO that's an expert at that issue. They know exactly how to write it up to present it. They know exactly where to go to get the grants to do it because they helped write those grants. And here's the part most people don't know. Those grants are written. You may get a grant, you need a new grant to help pave Main Street, but inside that grant, you're going to find a bunch of hidden things. It's going to have maybe dictates in there about how you have to use certain kinds of development programs, international policies for development, and that sort of thing. All of a sudden, that becomes a rule of the town because, hey, you took the money. People don't realize that. It is not free money. In my hometown of Newark, Ohio, we have in the center of town a square and a courthouse there. This is the center of town. When I was in high school, that's where we cruised on Saturday night. And I'll tell you what, that was the years of the muscle cars, and we had the most beautiful things going around there, around and around, because there's stoplights, along the way. That's how we could flirt with the girls. We could, this is what we did. Well, underneath there, obviously, there is infrastructure. It's 100 years old. Bad pipes, bad electrical wires, and so forth. So just a few years ago, the city put in for a grant to the EPA to get money to fix that infrastructure. Guess what the grant said also? That they had to put a roundabout on each corner of the square. They now have two-way traffic around the square, eliminated the traffic lights. That was to protect the environment. I cannot drive around the square anymore because my brain will not compute of two-way traffic around the square. It's unnatural. But that's the kind of thing you have to watch for. Those grants, they helped write them. They're designed to implement these policies as stealthily as they can. Now, the only reason that these private NGO forces have any authority in your community is because your elected representatives give it to them. That's how they're spreading the tyrannical poison. And all of them, they're surrounding. I talked to two city council people on Monday from Billings, Montana, and we talked about this very issue. And they told me that they have 100 NGOs surrounding them every day. And they get those grant money, they get part of that money. That's why they're pushing that. They get part, they want their paychecks. Yeah. So that is a major thing you have to understand. This is the reason why You elect somebody you maybe think's a really good person, and as time goes by, you try to talk to them, they aren't talking to you. They won't listen to you. They won't pay any attention to what you're trying to say about things because they're surrounded by these guys. And these guys, these NGOs have guaranteed them political success if they play the game, and they've guaranteed them political destruction if they don't. And what you're trying to say to them is completely opposite of anything they've heard anywhere else. And you will talk to one of your elected officials and you'll hear them say, well, this is just the way it's done now. This is the proper role of government, because they begin to accept that. That's where it goes. So, and there are many, many NGO organizations and planning groups working in the dark in the back rooms, joining in lockstep with Summit and Navigator and Venture and these guys. I had a friend of mine is a state legislator in Louisiana, and he called me to tell me that it has now been proposed for a carbon capture pipeline there, and they just brought in 52 lobbyists, is what he said. I think they're NGOs, whatever, but 52 to surround everybody at the State House, put this stuff in place to pressure them. Remember this. Every time you hear the word sustainable or carbon footprint, someone is pushing for more government power. It has nothing to do with protecting the environment. These are the few words designed to trigger you to accept more government control. To win, we have to take the fight to the local level. We are not going to win the fight by trying to influence Congress. Anybody here got any influence on Congress? You know, the higher it goes, the less influence we have. The way our founders built this system of government was that you were to have the most influence on your local elected officials, because you could have lunch with them. You could also find them in a dark alley. You know, you have some influence on that. So this is where we have to fight. Ask yourself, and if you do it on the local level, and eventually you begin to elect good people. I'm going to talk about how we do some of this stuff. You get good people in there, you just move up. The county then begins to change as well, and then it gets into the state legislature, am I right? Gets up there, and then it begins to affect the federal government. Ask yourself this. Do you want to be an isolated pessimist? Oh, the republic is dead. There's nothing we can do about it. Or do you want to be an effective activist? We are not outnumbered. We are out-organized. And we can fix that. Right? In your local community, that's where they are enforcing these policies, and that's where they've got to be stopped. If every community began to stop these assaults on our freedom, no federal edicts or executive orders can stop us. Our founding fathers made sure of that, the way they set it up. City councils, county commissions, state legislatures have much more power than they know. They can and they must stand up to federal overreach. And that includes powerful private corporations who intend to use the corrupt overreach of government to enrich themselves and subjugate you. How do we make it all a reality? I have coined the term, build a freedom pod in your community. Don't worry about what's happening next door in the next community. Just focus on your community. And in a freedom pod, the goal is you're going to protect individual liberty. You're going to protect private property. You're going to protect local free enterprise, those mom and pop shops. I don't care about the global corporations. They aren't free enterprise anyway. But those folks who put all of their life, all of their energy, all of their hopes and dreams into their little business that are being destroyed through all these policies, get some policies together to save them, to protect them. Building a freedom pod. So, if you want to transform your community into a freedom pod, you've got to start from scratch. The very thing we haven't wanted to do all these years, we got to do the dirty work. You must build a permanent infrastructure from which to carry on a continuous fight. That's the key. This goes beyond just the fight to stop the CO2 pipeline. What we are dealing with today is that those of us who have a fairly conservative outlook on things, we want limited government. The reason for that is we don't really like government. We want to keep it out of our lives as much as we can. We need government to do certain things, but we want to make sure we're in control of that. And we want to be left alone. We want to live our lives and move forward. And the problem with that is that the idea of getting involved on the local level is just a headache. I got a family to raise. I got a job I got to do. I got this, I got that. I haven't got time for this. And we all get excited about running somebody for president. Oh, wow, whoopee, whoopee, whoopee. And then we get our guy elected, and we go, oh, good, he's in there now. I don't have to do anything more. And we walk away. I can go home now. Well, when that happens, you leave him there left by himself, and you need to have anybody to back him up, so he gets crushed too. So this is what happens, and that happens at every level of government. That we can't just leave them there to go do it by themselves. They need us. But what we have to do to build a freedom pod is to build a team. I'm going to go through this. This is very basic. There's a whole lot more we have to do, but to give you the basic idea. Number one, how many here enjoy doing research, really digging down in and following it all the way through and getting what we can out of it? There's Sarah back there. Anybody? Hold, show of hands. Show me. You are vitally important people in this room because starting with research, you have got to know who your enemy is and what they're up to. Start with that. You got to know who the players are down at City Hall. Most of these planning groups, these NGOs, they are operating in cities all over the nation, some of them even internationally. They have a history. What programs have they promoted in the past? You can take a look at those programs or what they've done, see what happened with them, and if you find out, boy, there's a real disaster going on here, you've got a weapon. We have to discredit these guys. We have to make sure that they don't have any more power down there. Now, I have people always saying, Tom, they won't listen to us. It's all over anyway. There's nothing we can do. If you believe that, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Let's all just go home and watch them destroy us. I refuse. Stand with me because we're going to stop them. I guarantee it if we do it right. So we start with research. One of the things you do, look at your comprehensive plan that they've put together. Every community in the country has put this comprehensive plan together. This will tell you where the grants are coming from. It'll tell you what's next, where things are going to be done and so forth. And here is one thing to look for right from the beginning. Go through the entire comprehensive plan and look for one word that says anything about protection of private property. Doesn't exist. Number two, the watchers. We need 3 or 4 people to volunteer to go to every single public meeting and just listen. Watch what's going on, record what's going on, and you will find out a lot of stuff you didn't know. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to put yourself out. Just sit there. You'll figure out who the leaders are on the board itself. You'll find out who the real pusher is of all these policies, getting the other ones to go along with them, and you'll find out who the NGOs are. You might even find out, maybe you'll hear one of the councilmen will say to one of the NGOs, hey, Charlie, you know that plan we've been talking about to do such and such? We're going to start it next month. Wow, you already know now. Now you're ready to start to fight it ahead of time. Get all the details you need, and you can begin to get it out there. Let people know. You figure out who to target. Number 3 are the agitators. Now, these are your spokesmen. These are the people that are going to go and be in front of your whole movement. They'll be the ones that are up front on this, your best spokespeople. And I want to tell you right off, I've been telling you now about global governance, and I'm telling you about Agenda 21 and all of that. I'm telling you that so you know where this stuff comes from. But do not, under any circumstances, run into your city council and say, you're implementing UN Agenda 21. If there's a trap door under the podium where you're standing there, you're gone. They will not listen to a single word you have to say. The key to all of this I'm telling you is keep it very simple. You cannot save the republic in one day. You have got to go at it a little bit at a time. We'll look at if there's a policy that they're implementing that you're opposed to. Why are you opposed to it? Is it going to damage some property rights? Is it going to affect some neighbors? Is it going to hurt the economy of the community? Focus on that. Talk to them in a reasonable way. Don't scream and shout at them. There's other times we can do that. And, be reasonable, as they say in that. I would also suggest that you not all represent the same organization, that maybe you have different neighborhood organization names. The more people, the more names different that you're representing, looks like our movement is larger than it may be. And by the way, you do not need a majority to do this in town. 25 or 30 people can have a huge amount of impact on getting this done. Another one to look at, as you're doing that research and that comprehensive plan and everything, look at who the victims will be in these policies. What neighborhoods are affected, or different property is happening. It could be actually one of the victims, category of victims it could be people trying to drive to work every day and can hardly get down the street because it's all narrowed down because of bike lanes or things like that. Just be creative about it. Look at that. Those are kind of things you could influence and get out and change. But the other thing is, usually these big grandiose plans that they have, what they call smart growth, they select a certain area of the town to completely change it over. And one of those might be a lower income or a minority neighborhood. And there are people in there, even if it is a minority neighborhood or a low income neighborhood, there are people there who own their own businesses, people who own their own homes, maybe little mom and pop shops, restaurants and laundromats and little grocery stores or whatever. And when they come in there, the big boys with their bulldozers, they're going to make everything nice and shiny and spit polished. And they're going to tear down those homes. They're going to tear down those businesses and so forth. When they rebuild it all into this big, beautiful Taj Mahal, are those little businesses going to be represented there as the restaurants, as the laundromats? Nope. It's going to be those global corporations that are playing ball with them. The people who have lost their homes, they can't afford to live there. These are people who have lost their hopes and their dreams and their goals in life. They are devastated. You find out in your research something like this is going to happen, go down there and knock on doors. Say, I want to tell you something. You know what's going to happen here? Recruit them to your movement. This is how we grow. One of the things that we have got to do is we believe in freedom. We believe in limited government. We believe in free enterprise, property rights and all. But so many of the oppressed, the lower income and the minorities and so forth, they have been brainwashed into believing that you are a hate monger that's just trying to take what they need to live with. That's because we understand economics. We look at it and say, that is disaster. We've got to stop spending money on this. We've got to stop doing this. The other side is telling them, look, see, they're trying to take it away. Those mean, nasty people. But we need to get away to help people understand what we mean by freedom and how that is going to rise them up into society, equal opportunity, hopes and dreams achieved, their children prospering and so forth. We need to start to build that positive message. But the worst nightmare we can create for these forces and taking over everything is for those victims to be the ones standing there testifying before them and talking to them. They don't want to hear from them. Number 5 is a media team. Now, did every eye in a place just roll? Tom, the media is all left wing. Yeah, I know. But don't just ignore them. If they never hear from you, that may be the reason they never report anything from our side. Keep in mind that a reporter who is working, his beat is City Hall, for example. He's got a lot at stake here. If he starts to attack in just any old way, just going after him on things, he will lose his access to them. And he also is going to lose his annual invitation to their Christmas party. I mean, he's got things at stake here. He's got to be careful what he does. But you can open up a dialogue with them. You can meet them once in a while and say, hey, I just want you to see this. You just take a look at it, see what you think. But we found this out, and you might be interested in it. One day, something you give them might click, and you begin to build it. The other thing that we're doing now with media, a lot of people, this is starting to happen, they're building their own newspapers. And I don't mean you're going to have this great big thing with all these reporters and everything working there. I'm talking about putting like a monthly tabloid together. You can even sell advertising in it and have reports on it. What happened at City Hall last week? Something you write, or county, whatever the case may be, and you can fill it with the writings of national writers like myself and a whole lot of other people. Put that information in there. We have a gentleman in Southern Virginia in a very rural county who did this. And he would take it out once a month, and he would put it in 7-Elevens and filling stations and other stores and stuff for people to come in and pick it up. And they would come in and grab it. All of a sudden, he found, as he started bringing it in on his regular day, people were standing there waiting for it. He now has spread to 3 counties. I was in Ohio, and I had my table like I do here, and I was getting ready to speak, and this lady came in and said, can I put these papers on your table? She was producing a table. What was amazing to me was, I said, yeah, put them right there on the corner. What was amazing to me was the people now coming in the door go, oh, there's one. This is having an impact. Begin to create your own newspaper. And a social media team. If you got some young people, get them involved, get it in there. I have an organization in Shreveport, Louisiana, who have done all of these things. They have done a masterful job. It's not my organization, but I have advised them. I've worked with them. And they started a social media page, and they started putting all this information in there. They now have 4,000 people on that social media page, and they have 200 people that show up at every single city council meeting, every meeting. And when they first started trying to talk to a city councilman about the problems they were having, and he said, you're nice boys, but you're not going to have any influence on this. This is just the way it's done. You know what he said the last time I heard? How can I help you boys? Yeah, these are things we need to do. I mean, I'm not giving all the details of how we do all this, but you're getting the idea. And we're going to build on this. We're going to produce materials so you have things to lead you. You have people who have never been activists before. We've got millions of people now who are beginning to recognize there's a problem, but they've never done this before, and they don't know what to do. They want to get involved. The last thing you want to do is say, go get them. But what you can do, they can fill seats at City Hall, and that's very impressive. That makes a big difference, 100 people sitting there. They can hold signs if you want to hold a rally or something. Get them involved, and then they begin to get to know the rest of you, get to know, watching what the researchers are doing, or somebody, maybe the watchers, whatever. They think, I could do that. And then they get more involved that way. Now, one way to really get your operation started, right off the bat, before you get into everything else, you can create your own grading system of your city council or your county commissioners. Now, all you have to do is take a look at the policies that they have passed and grade the policies to begin with. 1 is total tyranny, 10 is freedom's heroes, and then look at how they voted on those very policies and grade them. I guarantee you there's not a politician on earth who wants to be a 2. Now, they will do, when you put this, you start passing this out, you put it in flyers and pass it out all over town. This is another thing you need to do, is get that team, maybe these activists, that can take these flyers door to door to get to people. That gets you around the media. But once you do that, they're going to do a big favor for you. They're going to respond. And when they do, they just made it a public debate. Perfect. Now keep coming at them with more and more. Now, understand this. We didn't get into this mess in a day, and we won't get out in a day. Yes, we are facing a dedicated, determined enemy like no generation of Americans has ever faced before. But our Constitution and the republic that it created are not dead. They are suffering from neglect. How do we stop them? Get equally determined to win, to restore our republic that has been the envy of the world. We have to change the debate. This is key. Change the debate. Get on the offense. Don't defend freedom. Demand it. Make it the issue. Where does this stand, councilman? Where does this stand in our ability to be free, our rights to be free? This policy you're putting in place. Make it the demand. Make it the policy. Change the debate. Make it the policy, the bottom line of everything. The key to stopping sustainable policies. No sustainable policy can be enforced without destroying private property rights. Again, where are the environmentalists? We need to turn all of this on them. The hypocrisy. Why aren't you out protecting the trees out on those farms under those solar panels? Why aren't you protecting farmland lost is farmland lost forever? Turn that around on them. Begin to show the hypocrisy of them. We have to take away their power. We have to degrade them. Take away their credibility. Stop being polite. We are such polite people. We lose, we go, well, I guess that's the way it is. Nothing we can do about it. I was in Colorado, and some people were showing me that in their town, oil was the main source of income there. And they showed me a city councilwoman had passed some kind of legislation that was affecting the oil industry. And they showed me this bar chart that showed the income or whatever, the prosperity of the community going down. I said, put her picture on it. It's hers. You know, it's what we make them feel. They've got to be responsible for their own actions. They've got to feel pain. You can keep trying to saw off the limbs, or you can destroy the roots. That's what we've got to do. Build the permanent organization and that infrastructure from which to quickly mount an opposition or a defense every day of the week. Don't get complacent. Don't think someone else is going to do it for you. Keep it simple and keep it focused. The last thing you want to do is sit home and not pay any attention, and some big issue comes along and you're going, you know anything about this? Charlie, what do you think? Hey, by the time you ask all those questions, they've got it in place. You need this permanent infrastructure with a spotlight on them every second of the day. We absolutely must not give in to the fear and accept the idea that we can't stop them. Rather than facing our doom, I believe we are facing a magnificent opportunity, perhaps as never before. More and more people are starting to clearly see the threat of the agenda they are trying to enforce. To live your life as you choose, start to grow your freedom pod. Focus just on your community, your city. If you succeed in your community, that will grow to the next and the next. We have to keep coming at them, keep up the pressure, and never back down. I am inspired by the words of Sam Adams. He was the most important founding father we had. He's the one who started the American Revolution. He started by saying no to the most powerful force on earth, the King of England. And look what he did. He won. Remember the words of Sam Adams. It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. Take back control of your community, your property, your local government, and you can stop this carbon capture pipeline and all the other garbage coming behind it. Restore that liberty. That is our mission. Thank you very much.